Students, welcome to my class. We have already begun the revision part of the half yearly examination. So today I'm going to start another revision chapter, that is for chapter 4, and then the title of this chapter is Colonialism and Tribal Societies. Now, as I have already explained you about the colonialism and tribal societies, uh, especially how this colonial rule in fact influenced in a different parts of our country, and then how they have occupied in a different parts of our country, especially in the place where there is a big trade and big centers were found at that time. So here we have already seen in the previous chapter that in the West Bengal especially, how they have actually implemented the Jamindari system, and then in these Jamindari systems we have found that there were many of the land where the farmers and the peasants were actually were earning their daily source, daily income. But then the moment the colonial rule was established, all this system was actually demolished, and then peasants, poor farmers and peasants were actually found very difficult themselves to survive. And as a result, most of the peasants in fact actually became tenants, and then also these people in fact has become the daily laborer, and then they were deprived of the properties and land, their cattle, wherever there was a big exploitation by the zamindars. And so the zamindars in fact took advantage most of the time, and then the Indian farmers, peasants in fact at that time became very miserable condition. And then these people in fact actually found themselves some other place, and then most of the times you can find that these people were actually sufferer, and then they were victimized very often. So that is the actually chapter 3 is speaking all about the zamindari systems, then Mahalwar system, Raidri system, and then also the commercial crops also we have studied in that chapter. And you learn about how this Britishers in fact actually grew the different crops, especially which was actually produce a huge amount of money. And the money was not seen at in India especially, but then the money was taken to their own country, and that is actually the drain of wealth is one theory is there in India about the Indian history. So let us know now in the chapter 4. Here we will talk about the tribal societies, especially when these tribals were actually freely lived and enjoyed their livelihood. And then we will talk about prehistoric period, and also we will learn about the this colonial rule after the influenced by these tribal societies. Okay, so here tribal people and their activities especially we will talk about. Now we know that tribal people are actually who are very simple, very much conservative at the same time, not allowing any other people to be mingled with them, because their traditions, their language, and everything is a bit different. So therefore, you have to understand that how these tribal societies, in fact, found themselves aloof from the mainstream society, and yet they were very happy. But the moment the colonial rule, in fact, invaded, and then most of the from the plains, especially money lenders and zamindars. So these people also actually hand in hand they started actually invading. So therefore, it is rather difficult this tribal people because of the presence of the other people in this area. Now let us know that in earlier days, before the British actually took political control in India, you have seen the tribal led a very secluded life. Secluded life means a separate life away from the mainstream society. So here and their interactions with the mainstream population was very limited. They were not much mingled, and they had their own sets of rituals and traditions, and which were actually different from the of the non-tribal population of India. Then they led simple lives and undertook various activities to sustain themselves. So here we will now study about. So we have to see that how these tribal people were living. Then again, hunting gathering was practiced by these tribals, and also we have found that they sold the products in the like in the market, bringing the some forestry products, especially like herbs that actually medicinal value. Then also you can see that animals for milk and meat and all also they are actually collecting, and then they are like for their survival they are taking the other goods from the market by selling the forest products in the market. So this way they were surviving, and their lifestyle was very simple, and they used to domesticate it, some of the animals at home. And then there are some of the like tribals like Gaddis and Himachal Pradesh, Bakrawalas of Kashmir, and also you can say that the Labadis of Andhra Pradesh. These are the all actually people comes under the tribal societies, and these people were actually keeping the different flocks, different cattle, and then used to sell. So agriculture was one of the main source of livelihood for the tribal people. So it is not that they didn't do the cultivation, but they did the cultivation. But there are also some tribals who used to, in the form of nomads, actually they used to move from place to place, carrying with them the different items along with them. So here agriculture was actually, and this agriculture became the main or the main source of this livelihood. Why? Because we have very often seen that these people are also practicing the Jhum cultivation. Jhum cultivation is really what you have to understand, that it is a patch of land where a number of like trees or forest trees are actually cleared, burned it, and then spade it, and then tilling the soil, and after that they are planting the crops and all. So that is they used to do. So here the land was actually cleared by burning the vegetation, and that way they actually make their cultivation. So this is known as the Jhum cultivation, or also it is known as the burn or slash agriculture. Okay, then a tribal life during the 19th century, that is after the arrival of the Britishers, how they actually changed their lifestyle, and how they became the very like poor and miserable condition. So now the tribal life especially changed. The tribal communities actually resided in remote areas within hills and forests. So living close to nature, they sustained themselves by their surroundings. One of the things we have to understand, the tribals actually they are not destroying the forestry, and they never cleared the jungle as others may think of, as in the book sometimes we are reading. According to their tribals, whenever they are trying to clear the jungle, kill the animal, before that they are actually asking the permission from the nature, saying that I'm going to receive you, I'm going to send because of some needs that is actually required for my family. And so they pray, and they just either they slaughter or anything animals, they do it. It is not that directly going and killing any of the animals. So it is false way of like presenting sometimes some of the historians about the tribals. Okay, so that's why you can see that they are worshipping the Ban Devata. It means a forestry god and goddesses. So they might have not having any image as we can find in the mainstream society. Rama, Krishna, Shiva, all these images are there. But this way people didn't have the image of their god and goddesses. So they are worshipping the nature in fact directly. Okay, so here you can find that they led the very simple life, and then their customs and traditions were actually followed very nicely. But unfortunately, the tribal communities who kept themselves was disrupted during the British period. So once the British established political control over the country like our India, they started implementing new rules and regulations which adversely actually affected the tribal life. So here let us know about the impact of land revenue system in these tribal societies. Now land revenue had been actually an important source of income that is the Britishers in fact they implemented. But the British started the system of permanent settlement, that is the 10 years of contract that is given to the zamindars, and then these zamindars in fact actually exploited maximum. And I feel that these people in fact they took the advantage in spite of they are being Indian. So therefore it's very shame on these people who actually for their uh, for their benefit, they have destroyed many families. So, according to the system, the Jamindar was actually given the responsibility of collecting revenue on behalf of the British, and 11% of course was given them as a share of the tax. So now, whatever the tax, in fact, they got from the people, sometimes the people are unable to pay the tax, and as a result of that, many of the this families, especially tribals people, they actually kept the cattle kind of like a mm, giving them a kind of like a just to keep for a few days, and then after that we will take it back, is it not? So such kind of thing started, and gradually, when they were unable to pay because of the sometimes false what call like weather conditions, or maybe the flood or natural calamities. So such kind of things actually really ruined the life of the DC people, and they couldn't get back their life again as they were before. So therefore, this land revenue systems in fact killed their this livelihood. And then to increase their revenue, the Jamindars started clearing forest lands in the quest to increase their cultivable land. They started occupying the land which was used by the tribals, and the tribals was sustained themselves on forest resources, found their lives disrupted, and to survive, they were actually forced to take loans from the moneylenders and zamindars, and unable to pay of their loans, the zamindars would make them work as bonded laborers, and their future generation also ended up working for the zamindars to pay off the debts. So these are the very very miserable conditions started. Besides, you can see that in the tribal land, the Britishers in fact started laying the this railway network, railway track, and when the railway track was actually laid, most of the forestry land was actually maximum of the jungle was cleared, forestries are cut, and then the costly cuts, costly woods in fact they have taken to their own country, or rather they use for the railway track as well as for the ship building. All these areas they actually started making use of the this wood. So now you can understand that during this time, so during this time, most of the time, this excuse me, these people in fact they suffered, and they didn't have their like a house, especially shelter. Then clothing they had a problem, food they had the problem. It means three these basic things which they were founding before, now they found very difficult themselves. So therefore, this time their life became miserable, and many of them actually forget about their culture, their traditions, their rituals, and then here the missionaries came, and then these missionaries in fact actually took the advantage of to convert them into Christianity. So they understood the motive of the Britishers, they understood the motive of the zamindars, especially those who are in India, and then how they were actually deprived of that, they understood about it. And so here the Christian missionaries also came, and then they actually what call like told them that if you are going to convert, then we will give you food, lodging, everything. So out of like a greediness, some of the tribes in fact joined, and then they converted themselves into the Christian missionaries, the religion they accepted. So here you can understand the resentment transformed into violent outburst event, and then a tribal revolt in Chota Nagpur how actually began because of the too much like atrocities that was actually created by the this missionaries and the Britishers. So tribal revolts in Chota Nagpur started, and then tribal revolts in India were a result of the British encroachment on their lands. and the tribal communities were actually a close knit group of people who had limited interactions with the non-tribal population. So they considered the non-tribal population, especially the British officials, the landlords, and the moneylenders, as outsiders. And the tribals actually referred to these outsiders as the Khus, and during the British period, the Chota Nagpur region witnessed a series of rebellions, starting from the Khol rebellion, followed by the Santals and a Munda rebellion. So here the rebellion actually rose the voice, and then they started attacking. So the Khos were actually inhabitants of Chota Nagpur region, and in 1820 the king of Porhat accepted the British control and agreed to pay huge taxes to them. And the Khos did not agree to this arrangement, and the rebelled. The Khos used traditional weapons like bows and arrows, which proved to be no match to the British troops, which used modern weaponry. So the Khos were exploited by the non-Adivasis together contract, okay, and they felt threatened and by the encroachment of the British, and Jamindars and other non-tribals, and thus revolted against them. The British were actually able to suppress the rebellion, but a lot of lives were actually lost during this rebellion. So you can ultimately see that due to the angerness, due to the insult, most of the tribals, in fact, they couldn't tolerate the Britishers atrocities, and in retaliation they actually even they did attacking to them, and then most of the tribals, in fact, at this time, due to their primitive weaponry system, they couldn't succeed, and then they actually died of and many of the tribals, in fact, they died during this time. So this is how the 1827 this revolt of this Khol rebellion actually rose. Okay. So in my next video, I will talk about the Santhal rebellion. Then I will talk about the Munda rebellion. Then also we will talk about the northeast region, where also the Britishers actually created a lot of problem for the other members of this community, especially tribals. So the British presence, in fact, actually created a lot of inconveniences. And how do you feel this Britishers, in fact, one way? Some people say that one way they did well. Some people say one way they actually brought the different rules and regulations. So, but then when a person is becoming miserable condition, then people do not appreciate in that condition. So therefore, today's in this revision, you must read it almost this all this part, and then you get acquainted with more information about the tribals. And also I have in the class I have talked about the different food items, different herbals, which actually were familiar by these tribals, especially Adivasis of this forestry. So those things also you can get the familiar. Okay, so see you in my next class.